The Rangers' title defense is officially dead. But just how bad a job did the Rangers do of defending that title? Compare that to past champions and look at this last series ever in the Oakland Coliseum. All of that and more on this episode of Locked On Rangers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked onto the World Series champion Texas Rangers. I'm Bryce Patrick, a cripplingly addicted Texas Rangers fan, covering this team for 11 seasons, including all 6 as the founder and host of this podcast. Thank y'all so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. If you're not already, you can follow me on Twitter at Bryce Patrick. You can follow the show at Locked On Rangers. Hit subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform and on YouTube, where the best way you can help grow the show is to comment nearly any single thing below. Now, before we get into the Rangers' attempt at a title defense and how it stacks up with former reigning champions and Josh Young having a season-ending injury and the last Major League games, at least for now, ever played at the Oakland Coliseum, this episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. The right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your baseball rivals. Book today on Booking.com, the official accommodation partner of Major League Baseball. Get the Booking.com app today. Now, the Rangers' title defense officially died this weekend against the Mariners. Their playoff hopes are officially at 0, and this team is just playing out the string. Not only are the Rangers' playoff hopes dead, also their hopes of having a winning season are officially dead with their 82nd loss of the year. The Rangers now will have had a winning season just one time since the start of 2017, after doing it basically every year from 2009 until 2016. Without that 2014 year. You want to go ahead and throw out that mess of a year. But this year has been equally a mess. The Rangers had incredibly high hopes for their season. The whole blueprint of the season was, okay, maybe this offense can carry us like it did last year while we wait for those big arms on the injured list to come back in Max Scherzer, in Tyler Mahle, in Jacob deGrom. And, well, at points they all came back. Most later than initially anticipated. deGrom was hoped to return around August. I was hoping early August. It ended up being not till September, early September. Max Scherzer was initially supposed to come back in June, then was supposed to come back in May, then did come back in June, went back on the IL after saying, nope, I'm not going to need an IL stint. Came back for one start and then went back on the IL and was done. Only 9 starts from him, only 3 starts from Tyler Mahle, who had a couple of decent outings, but got absolutely rocked in his last start back and did not see the field again. Not a whole lot that the Rangers got from those 3. Granted, the 2 starts they've gotten from Jacob deGrom have been very good, but they have been a combined 6 1/3 innings, and not exactly what you were hoping for from your ace to come back with this team in playoff contention, to put them, over the edge, give them that, ace in your literally ace tucked up your sleeve in the final few weeks of that postseason run. Alas, the Rangers were pretty much out of it from the midpoint of August. And the pitching that they had was fine. It was just fine. It's funny that this bullpen was such an incredible disaster last year, and the Rangers' answer to solve it, actually really the only thing they did in free agency besides bringing in Mahle, at least the only thing they did of consequence, was sign 2 guys. 2 older guys coming off of okay seasons to just shore up the back end of their bullpen, and Kirby Yates and David Robertson. And those 2 were absolutely fantastic. They pretty much fixed it. But the only problem was everybody else was not great. Leclerc had a not great year. The Rangers got 16 whole innings from Josh Sborz, although he was very good in those 16 innings. When you get more innings out of Yerry Rodriguez than Josh Sborz, it's not exactly a situation setting you up for success. But obviously, the whole thing, all year long, if you listen to one episode of this podcast all year, I'm pretty sure I've said it on every single episode that the offense was indeed the problem. A bunch of guys having career years last year, and this year having career worst years. I mean, just truly awful years from Jonah Heim, from Marcus Simeon, and from Adolis Garcia as well. Also, not to mention the injuries to Josh Young. I'll get to what his season-ending injury means for him and the concerns that I have about him moving forward now. You even got a breakout year from Josh Smith, who was an all-star caliber player for that first half. And still, you couldn't do much of anything when the whole rest of this offense was, to put it, nicely, mid. They were really below mid. They were bad. This was a bad offense this year. And it's not necessarily something that the Rangers saw coming. I mean, you can criticize this front office for not spending more as a title defense. You can be frustrated with not bringing back Jordan Montgomery. We've all seen how that's worked out in Arizona. Had he just signed a regular deal with the Rangers and had a normal offseason and had normal spring training, would he have been better? Maybe, but that wouldn't have fixed this offense. This offense was the thing that carried them last year, and it was supposed to be the thing that would carry them this year. But the fall off from so many guys is not something I think the Rangers would have expected. I mean, there weren't all that many bats the Rangers were actually in on this offseason. I don't think that signing JD Martinez at DH for most of the season would have put this team over the top, although the fact that the Rangers most used DH this year is Travis Jankowski, and his .522 OPS, maybe that would have been a different story. Maybe it would have been a different story if the Rangers weren't relying so heavily on Wyatt Langford, who has been amazing in June, amazing in September, and outside of that, not particularly special, and he'd be the first one to tell you that. Relying so heavily on Evan Carter, who played 45 games this year and was playing through an injury in a lot of those games, probably longer than he should have, and then had the back injury that just did not heal and eventually ended up costing him his season. And Josh Young with a hit by pitch in the fourth freaking game of the year, and now he is done for the year with the chronic inflammation in his broken wrist that took forever to heal. It was such a complicated surgery. It was just the worst, absolute worst place that a batter could get hit, is right there on that wrist, exposed. Not even by a 109-mile-an-hour line drive, like the line drive that Jorge Soler hit that broke his thumb in August of last year. Just a freak accident and a difficult surgery and a difficult recovery, and Josh Young only plays 46 games this year, just one more than Evan Carter, and the exact same number of games as Robbie Grossman, which, credit to Robbie Grossman, he was what the Rangers expected him to be. Now, should they have traded an actual prospect to get him as opposed to just bringing him back last year? Maybe. Probably. But this isn't the only team to have a faulty title defense. And thankfully, with the things that are on the horizon for next year with those young guys, hopefully a healthy Josh Young, a healthy Evan Carter, a sophomore surge from Wyatt Langford, which is kind of what I'm expecting given what he's done to end this year and how much he's improved and how quickly. And not to mention, the growth of Kamar Rocker and Jack Leiter making progress, and Cody Bradford, who also missed most of this season, which is not an insignificant injury. It's not the only team to, fall short in terms of a title defense. I mean, there have been plenty of teams the last few years that have finished with a losing record after winning the World Series. Teams like, the 2020 Nationals in the COVID year, 25-34 season for them, or 34 record for them, and they also had a losing record, nearly 100 losses the year after that, and so they didn't just immediately bounce back. I mean, the Royals were a 500 team after they won the World Series. That's one that I'm going to look further into in the next segment, talking about what the Rangers need to do to avoid being just a one-and-done champion. Boston Red Sox in 2014 finished, 20 games under 500, or 10 games under 500, I should say, 71 and 91. The Giants did it back in 2013. The Cardinals did it in 2007, and the Angels did it in 2003. The Rangers are not the only team to fall short after a miraculous World Series run that I don't think a whole lot of us saw coming, at least heading into October last year. But hey, flags fly forever, but you'd like to have multiple flags. And coming up, we're going to look at why the Rangers need to avoid a cautionary tale in the Kansas City Royals and why they could end up just like them. We're talking about that and more right after this from our sponsors. This show is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Shout out to the Everydayers for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. The Rangers take on the A's tonight at 8:40 p.m. Central Time. Mitch Spence versus Nathan Eovaldi. You can catch every pitch of the hometown broadcast on SiriusXM. Just download the SXM app and search Rangers. Now, the Rangers aren't the only team to fall short in their title defense, but, heading into this offseason, I thought this team was set up well for the long haul. I was excited about the future with, two young outfielders that were set to be potential superstars in Evan Carter and Wyatt Langford, with a young core of guys like, Josh Young, with, what we saw from Jonah Heim last year being an all-star, what we saw from Nathaniel Lowe the last couple of years, and of course your tandem star duo up the middle of the best middle infield in baseball, which I'm not entirely sure is the best middle infield in baseball anymore. Maybe it is. I haven't really looked at too many second basemen and how they're doing this year. But still, this team that looked like it was set up to win for years and years to come. And there is a danger that this team becomes a one-and-done champion. There's a danger like that with everybody. It happened with the Nationals in 2019, a team that had many young superstars. Many. They had Trey Turner, who was 26 at the time, and he was an absolute star, and they ended up trading him away. Victor Robles was, a burgeoning star at 745 OPS as a 22-year-old. It's taken him a while to really come into his own. It really hasn't been until this year that he's had anywhere near the success that he did his rookie year. And of course they had, 19-year-old Juan Soto with a 950 OPS as a 20-year-old, 150 games that year, and he was absolutely phenomenal. But they also had a star ace in, of course, Max Scherzer, not to mention a homegrown ace in Steven Strasburg, and they also had Patrick Corbin. All three of those guys were absolutely fantastic that year. And, they gave Steven Strasburg a massive contract, and he was a pitcher, and he fell apart. Patrick Corbin has been durable, but terrible ever since then. And Max Scherzer was basically Max Scherzer from that point on, but it just wasn't quite enough for them. They traded away Max Scherzer and Trey Turner in a package that I still can't believe the return that they got for a season and a half of Trey Turner and half a season of Max Scherzer. Still kind of insane to me. But, that was an intentional choice that the Nationals made with Steven Strasburg being, what he was, with the, two of their three aces, co-aces at the time, falling apart due to injury or just bad, and also losing Anthony Rendon in free agency, which looks like a net positive for them given what's happened with him with the Angels. But a team that was supposed to be also there for the long haul was the Kansas City Royals. The Kansas City Royals, after they won in 2015, they had a young core. It looked like it was there to stay. Now, the pitching was a bit suspect, and that ended up, holding true for years to come. But the young core was there. They had a 25-year-old Salvador Perez. They had a 25-year-old Eric Hosmer, a 26-year-old Mike Moustakas. They had Alex Gordon in his prime. Lorenzo Cain had a 7-WAR season that year. He was still on the right side of 30. Heck, even Kendrys Morales was still relatively young at that point, only 32 years old that year. They look like they were built to last for a while. And they gave Eric Hosmer and Mike Moustakas massive contracts that ended up being just huge albatrosses. Alex Gordon quickly kind of fell off. Lorenzo Cain was fine, but nowhere near what he was that year. And they just didn't have the pitching to sustain it. And they had young Yordano Ventura, who was supposed to be their ace of the future, and he tragically passed away not that many years later. Their incredible bullpen that was really the reason for their success those 2 years where they went to the World Series in back-to-back seasons. Shocker, a bullpen didn't hold up as a long-term successful strategy to build a dynasty. Bullpens are fickle. Even the best ones. They're always very, very fickle. And the fact that they was amazing 2 years in a row is honestly pretty incredible. The Rangers are hoping to not be that. There is reason to believe, okay, they need some sort of bounce back from, Jonah Heim, mostly, and Adolis Garcia, mostly. If they can pick two guys to get back to about what their career averages can be, actually, I might pick more of Marcus Semien and Adolis Garcia, of guys who have fallen off this year and get back to about where they've been in an average season career. Not even having a career season, but just an average season, because Jonah Heim offensively has been terrible this year. I mean, defensively, he hasn't been super great as well. Nathaniel Lowe's numbers aren't overall very impressive, but when you look at how it stacks up to the league average, I mean, he's still got it on base in near 360, which is about his career mark. I mean, he's got only 13 home runs this year. The power has been down, but it's also been down around the league. So Nathaniel Lowe bouncing back, I feel like, is a pretty decently safe bet. Josh Smith, I don't necessarily anticipate him having another 3.5 WAR season next year, although defensively he is a great defensive player. Offensively, I mean, I don't think he's ever going to have the power numbers to be an above average, all-star player again. He just does not have that in him, and he's put together great plate appearances this year, and without him, the Rangers would be in a much, much deeper hole. But they've got the young pieces, and not only that, they've got young pieces on both sides of the ball to be excited about. You got Wyatt Langford this year, who less than a year after being drafted is going to put up a 3.5 WAR season as a rookie, as an everyday player, go from a pretty suspect defender out there in the outfield to at least above average, not quite Gold Glover, but maybe fringe Gold Glover in a corner, to maybe he might even be average defensively in center field. I mean, Evan Carter's back injury, the second season-ending back injury he's had, and he hasn't even turned 22 yet, or I think he just turned 22 a couple weeks ago. It's definitely concerning about how long he is going to hold up, and we still have a question of, can he hit lefties? That's still a big question with Evan Carter. And Josh Young, I am the last one to label any player injury-prone, but this has just been a season-long frustrating injury that he has, suffered. It could happen to anybody. He's had a bunch of random little freak injuries, from broken toe to a shoulder injury to getting hit right in the thumb with a line drive that would have broken anybody's thumb, to getting hit right on the worst part of the body with a pitch with his wrist just completely exposed, and it just ruined his entire season. And ended up coming back and looking half decent. I mean, the first couple of weeks were a little rough for him, but he put together 40-something games, 42 games after coming off the IL. I mean, it took him much, much longer to recover because that surgery was so complicated, because the recovery was so complicated. But still, it's not just these young hitters that there's reason to look at next year and say, okay, without having that month longer that they're playing, that most of them hadn't gone through that kind of a grind of going to the World Series and seeing how long it takes and how much longer your season is and how much shorter your off season is. And also, they've got some, for once, young pitching to get really genuinely excited about. I mean, Jacob deGrom coming back, he is not young pitching, but the Rangers have had very, very little of him since they signed him. They had that whole first month in 2023, which was awesome. They've had a couple of starts here, and they'll have one more before the end of this season. But adding him to the room, hopefully fully healthy, or at least mostly healthy. I mean, heck, even 100 to 120 innings of Jacob deGrom is so much better than the 30 that they got last year, or the, 15 at most. No, 12 at most, I think they'll get this year. They also have Kamal Rocker, who is a breakout potential star pitcher next year, at the very least a solid member of the rotation. Not to mention the progress of Jack Leiter this year. He has made big steps forward. And even if you're not a believer in Jack Leiter as a starting pitcher, Cody Bradford has been sensational this year. I mean, especially compared to the expectations for him, what was expected from this rotation, and just what the Rangers have produced in terms of starting pitching over the last decade. Cody Bradford has been, I don't want to say a miracle, but it kind of feels like it at this point with how poorly the Rangers have developed their own starting pitching. And not to mention just those guys, but all the young guys on the farm that have been having great seasons, like Alejandro Rosario, like Winston Santos, like Emiliano Teodo, and like a dozen other guys that have just made big strides. The Rangers have reason to believe that they can be successful in the long term. Now, will they bounce back next year and pull the whole Bruce Bochy, odd year nonsense as a member of the AL, whereas when he was in the NL, he could only win world championships in the even years? Only time will tell about that. But what we do know is that this year has been an absolute failure for the most part. There have been some bright spots if you want to look for it, but on the whole, this has been an incredibly frustrating year. The Rangers will admit it. Chris Young will admit it. Bruce Bochy. Everybody in this organization knows that, just because they didn't win back-to-back championships, just because they didn't, get there. I mean, that was not the expectation. Just be competitive year in, year out. At least have a winning record, and they're not going to do that this year. And that's frustrating. And that's a failure. And they're going to have to do a lot right this offseason, have a lot go right for them next year to get themselves back in contention. But still, even though it's been incredibly frustrating, there is a fan base that is in a much worse place than the Texas Rangers, and that is where the Rangers are headed tonight, to Oakland, to play the final Major League games in the Oakland Coliseum. We're going to talk about what that means for the Rangers and why it's just bad for baseball, what John Fisher has done. All that and more right after this word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On Rangers is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. Explore those U.S. cities you've always secretly wanted to learn more about. Whether it's baseball cities, or you want to go to a college football game, or whatever it is, Booking.com can help you find the right stay in any U.S. city. Whether it's your home teams or a rival's stadium. No matter who you're rooting for this postseason, Booking.com can make you a fan of any U.S. cities. From hotels that overlook stadiums to family-friendly resorts to cute bed and breakfast stays, Booking.com has so many different choices across the U.S. I mean, last year I happened to go to Houston, which, overall, as a sports city, I'm very against, but I had a very nice time watching Game 7 of the ALCS there, and the Rangers win that game. An absolutely delightful stay, because on Booking.com, the right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your baseball rivals. Booking.com. Booking.yeah. This show is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out all the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. They've also got odds on the World Series right now. The Dodgers, the favorite, at plus 330. Shohei Ohtani has been just on fire as of late. Right now, the next favorite is the Philadelphia Phillies at plus 410. Then the Yankees, followed by the Astros, Orioles, and Padres, who have been playing really darn well as of late. I think that is probably my rooting interest in this playoff chase, seeing Jurickson Profar maybe get his first ring. So visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. Now, the Rangers tonight head into Oakland for the final 3 Major League Baseball games at the Oakland Coliseum. They will be against the thumping A's, who have been a really frisky team in the last couple of months, basically since the All-Star break. I mean, the A's bang. They absolutely bang the baseball over the fence. They are a very good offensive team with just a lot of power hitters. They might end up having, 5 different guys. Geloff is a little bit of a stretch, but they right now have 4 different players with more than 20 home runs, which is not something I saw coming in the least. JJ Bleday has been a fantastic player in center field. Lawrence Butler has been one of the best players in baseball since the calendar turned to July, and Brent Rooker has been absolutely phenomenal this season. absolutely phenomenal. A 937 OPS and 38 home runs. The guy has just been absolutely on fire. And as we all know, Shea Langoliers, former Keller standout, just absolutely murders the Rangers. So I wouldn't be shocked if Shea Langoliers got over that 30 home run plateau. He's too shy of it in this 3-game series against the Rangers. But alas, you heard me right. These are the last Major League games at Oakland Coliseum. Next year, the A's will be playing in the AAA affiliate of the Giants, Sacramento, for the next couple of years until they get whatever sorted out with their stadium building in Las Vegas, which is already a nightmare, as has been really everything with Oakland the last few years. And yesterday, the A's owner, John Fisher, wrote an open letter to the public in one of the most just completely disingenuous and downright deceitful moves. I mean, filled with so many lies. I would read you the thing, but I don't think I can read it without physically retching. Talking about how, we tried so hard to win here and so hard to keep Oakland here. And, it's if I could, talk to each and every single one of you, when this man has repeatedly hid and dodged every attempt by the media to get him to answer for his crimes, to answer for his injustices, to answer for the stupidity and clear boneheadedness of every single turn of this move to just force Oakland to Vegas. This is now the third professional team that the city of Oakland will have lost in the last decade, with the Warriors moving the least far. They just moved to the other side of the bay in San Francisco, but still, that is a big loss. They also lost the Oakland Raiders to Las Vegas, and now they are going to lose the A's, their last team, to Las Vegas as well. I mean, John Fisher is the failed son of a billionaire, inherited the JCPenney fund, and has done absolutely nothing with it. I mean, he has done absolutely nothing to try and improve this team. I mean, Moneyball is an interesting concept, and I feel like a lot of fans in baseball try and, imagine themselves as a GM, and so they want to, make the right spend-thrifty moves, and as a result, we have ended up praising teams like the A's and the Rays, who just don't spend any money at all, as if that's a good thing for baseball. No. Winning on the margins is a good thing for baseball, but you also have to spend money, at least commensurate with what a major league team should spend, and not just pocket all of that money and try and get all the taxpayers to pay for your stadiums and everything, and just run your team mercilessly into the ground until the darn loyal fans that you do have end up not coming anymore. Because the prices keep raising, the concession prices keep raising, the price of everything keeps raising, while the payroll gets lower and lower and lower, and the investment in the team gets lower and lower and lower. And it's just running one of the premier franchises in Major League Baseball into the ground. Well, we've all seen this coming over the last 8 years. And this is not just, it's Oakland, so who cares? No, it can happen to anybody. And the blueprint has been laid. The other owners are willing to just sit back and say, yep, that's fine. You can tank your team into the ground just so you can get more money from somewhere else and make more money somewhere else, and make promises to a city that doesn't know how much of a cheapskate you are, of saying, oh no, once we're in Las Vegas, then I'll spend money on this team. Then I'll spend money on the payroll and all these things that I hadn't done for, nearly a decade in Oakland. No, he won't. And don't be surprised if the Chicago White Sox are next. I mean, we've all seen what an abject failure they have been this year, how much of a miserable embarrassment they have been. I mean, already tied they're headed for the Cleveland Spiders of that record. I don't think they're going to get to 130-something losses. They're already at 120. And their owner, Jerry Reinsdorf, saying, yeah, we're going to cut payroll because that's what this team needs. We need to be a little more thrifty. He's going to take one of the worst teams in Major League history and try and make it even worse the next year. He's already made threats about leaving Chicago for years, and now he might just finally get to end up having his way, and he won't be looking like as much of a villain as moving the A's out of Oakland, which the A's have been in Oakland since 1968. 1968! How many of you have even been alive since then? And the White Sox have been in Chicago for significantly longer than that, and they have been one of the premier franchises in the sport, one of the flagship franchises in the sport, Granted, they've been kind of terrible and mid the last couple of years, but a lot of that is due to owner incompetence. I mean, a bad owner and a hands-on bad, cheap owner can ruin any sports franchise. I mean, just look at the Dallas Cowboys and what they've done since Jerry Jones took over. I mean, I will say a lot. I have said, and probably will continue to say, a lot of disparaging things about the Rangers owner, Ray Davis. But one thing that I won't say is that he's, completely cheap or that he is completely hands-on. He will spend the money. He will not tank this team into the ground, this franchise into the ground, and try and move it somewhere else just to make a quick buck. I respect that about him. He will at least give the Rangers a decent payroll, despite, I think, overblown concerns with the lack of TV money and all kinds of other things that he didn't spend this offseason coming off of a World Series championship trying to cut payroll. It's not a great look. I understand his prerogatives, and I think they're wrong as a fan, but I understand them. And at the very least, he's not doing this to the Rangers. Because I can't imagine what I would be doing if someone bought the Rangers, purposefully ran them into the ground, and the rest of Major League Baseball just said, yep, there's nothing you can do about it. It is horrendous for the sport, what is happening to Oakland. And it sets a terrifying precedent that could happen to literally anyone. Ray Davis isn't going to be around forever. His family is not super involved, so he might end up, after if he passes away, they might end up selling to someone else, some other random billionaire, like John Fisher, who wants to do this exact same thing. I mean, heck, Mark Cuban, who I thought would own the Mavs forever, sold off last year, and their new owner, has a lot of ties to Vegas, and there have been some rumors circling around that maybe they would end up being moved to Las Vegas. Moving a franchise with that kind of history is incredibly bad for the sport, and it sets such a dangerous precedent that it could literally happen anywhere. So just remember that next time you're making fun of Oakland for not having this and that and the other and saying, oh, well, maybe their fans should have shown up. No. This is a top-down thing, and as frustrated as I have been with Ray Davis, at least he's not John Fisher. That is one of the higher compliments that I can give the man. That's going to do it for today's show. Thank y'all so much for listening and subscribing, and until next time, don't forget to enjoy World Series champion Texas Rangers baseball.